The call came at 2:46 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had just taken my first sip of lukewarm coffee, sitting in the break room at work, trying to convince myself I still had 2 more hours of sanity left before clocking out. It was the school nurse. I remember her voice, clipped but shaky. "Lexy, it's Ava." She collapsed during gym class. "We're calling an ambulance." I think it's serious." I dropped everything, my phone, the coffee, my bag, and I ran. I didn't even ask my manager for permission. What were they going to do? Fire me for being a mother? I met Ava at the hospital, her skin pale, eyes fluttering, and tubes already being inserted as nurses buzzed around like a storm cloud had landed in the pediatric ER. My husband, Dan, rushed over an hour later, breathless and red in the face from panic, and in that moment, I thought, this is what family is. This is what it means to be in it together. I was wrong, so wrong. We stayed in the hospital for 3 days straight. No sleep. Barely any food. Just monitoring, pacing, and praying. Ava had a rare condition. Nothing we had seen signs of before. Something with her heart, her rhythm, her lungs struggling to keep up. One moment she was doing cartwheels, the next she was tethered to machines. I lived by her bedside. I watched every beep, every breath. Dan came and went. He was trying to juggle work, family, and his own rising anxiety. And I gave him grace. At first, then came the text from her, his mother. "I know Ava's in the hospital and all, but we still have the family dinner Sunday, right? Everyone's expecting you to host. It's not like it's a funeral." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then reread it, hoping I had misunderstood something. Anything, but no, she meant it. "Let me explain something about my mother-in-law, Lorraine. She's the kind of woman who can smile while she's stabbing you in the back, and then blame you for bleeding on her white carpet." She had always found subtle ways to undermine me. "Oh, you're doing boxed cake for Ava's birthday? Interesting. Or Dan looks so tired lately. Are you taking care of him properly?" But this wasn't subtle. This was a slap. My daughter was fighting for her life. And she wanted pot roast and matching napkins. I didn't respond to the text immediately. I just turned my phone face down and leaned over to kiss Ava's forehead. But the anger? It brewed. Quietly. Like a volcano no one notices until the lava hits their front door. Dan came back later that evening. I showed him the message. He chuckled, he actually chuckled, and said, "You know how she is. She doesn't mean it like that." That's when I snapped. "You need to stop defending her, Dan," I said. "She meant it. And you're enabling it." He raised his hands. Okay. I'll talk to her." But I knew he wouldn't. He never did. Not when she questioned my parenting. Not when she barged into our house with unannounced suggestions. And not now, with our daughter hooked up to wires. I sent Lorraine a message the next morning. "No. There is no dinner. My child is in the hospital. If that's inconvenient, feel free to reschedule with someone who isn't watching her child fight to breathe." She left me on read. But the damage was already done. Not to her, she couldn't be damaged. Not by guilt. Not by shame, and certainly not by empathy. But something inside me cracked that day. And I would never look at family, his family, the same way again. After I sent that message to Lorraine, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd come to her senses. That some part of her would feel shame or remorse or anything resembling human emotion. But instead of a call or an apology, I got a group text. "Since Lexy's not up for hosting, we'll move dinner to our place. Everyone bring a dish. Hope you can all make it." Like I was a flaky party planner canceling a picnic. Not a mother trying to hold herself together in a hospital ward. The text included Dan. He said nothing. No, worse, he reacted with a thumbs up emoji. That was when I realized something ugly. I wasn't just alone in dealing with Lorraine. I was alone in my marriage. That night, after Ava fell asleep, I sat by her bed and stared at Dan across the room. He was scrolling on his phone. Probably checking sports scores or replying to that text chain like it was any other Sunday. "I need to ask you something," I said quietly. He glanced up. "What's up? Do you even understand what's happening right now? Do you realize how serious this is?" He frowned. "Of course I do. What kind of question is that? Then why are you treating it like it's just another week? Why are you letting your mother act like Ava's hospitalization is a minor inconvenience?" He sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Lex, I'm just trying not to blow everything up right now. My mom's being herself. I can't fix her. But I also can't fight with everyone. So instead you let them pretend this isn't happening," I snapped. "You let them dismiss our daughter, and you act like I'm the problem for being upset. She's stable now, right?" He said, like that somehow cancelled everything out. "You're overreacting." Those two words. Overreacting. I had heard them too many times in this house. When I brought up how Lorraine insulted my cooking at Thanksgiving? Overreacting. When I asked why his mom got a key to our home without asking me? Overreacting. And now, with my child in a hospital bed, still overreacting. The silence between us stretched long into the night. And as I looked over at Ava, cheeks sunken, foreline gently swaying, I felt the slow realization sink in: I wasn't just dealing with a toxic mother-in-law. I was married to a man who didn't know how, or refused, to protect his own family. And maybe he never did. The next morning, Dan left to check on the house. He said it so casually, like nothing had changed. Like our lives weren't unraveling thread by thread. When he returned, he brought takeout and a change of clothes. But no apology. No sign he'd spoken to Lorraine. Just that same distant avoidance, like the less he said, the less real it would all be. I got another message from Lorraine later that day. "We missed you at dinner. Hope Ava's doing better. When things settle, we should talk about rescheduling." Rescheduling. Like it was a rain delay, not a hospitalization. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to say. Ava had been discharged for a week when Lorraine invited us to dinner. "Family tradition," she said, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't all but demanded pot roast while my daughter lay in a hospital bed. Dan, as expected, wanted to go. "She's trying to make peace," he said. I nearly laughed. "She's trying to save face." He gave me that tired look, the one that always came right before I gave in for the sake of keeping the peace. But this time, I didn't cave. I went. But not to make peace. To make it clear that I was done playing their games. Lorraine greeted us with her usual fake warmth, the air around her thick with faux concern. "Oh, Lexy," she said, pulling me into one of those performative hugs. "How's little Ava?" Such a scary time for all of us. All of us. I clenched my jaw and walked past her into the dining room, where the rest of the family was already seated. The table was full to cousins, aunts, Dan's sister, even his dad, who usually stayed quiet. I took my seat, my heart pounding. Dan sat beside me, unaware of the storm I'd brought with me. Dinner started with small talk. Lorraine passed dishes around like we were on some cooking show. She complimented everyone, commented on the roast, and praised Dan for staying so strong during Ava's hospital stay. That was it. I put my fork down. "I think we should talk about that," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room fell quiet. Lorraine's smile froze mid-sip of wine. Dan turned to me slowly, eyes already pleading. "Lex, no," I said firmly. "Everyone here should know what really happened." I looked at Lorraine. "When Ava was in the hospital, you texted me asking if I'd still be hosting your dinner. You said, and I quote, 'It's not like it's a funeral.' Gasps. Actual gasps. Even from the cousins who normally didn't blink at Lorraine's rudeness. Lorraine's face flushed. That's not what I meant. Oh, it's exactly what you meant, I cut in. You've made it very clear what matters to you. Your traditions. Your dinners. Your appearances. But not Ava. Not your son. And definitely not me. I turned to Dan, and you. You stood by and said nothing. You told me I was overreacting when I begged you to put our daughter before your mother's social calendar. Dan's mouth opened, but no words came. I kept going. I have been quiet for years. Bit my tongue. Smiled through your jabs, Lorraine. You questioned my parenting, my cooking, my career, and Dan never once told you to stop. Lorraine looked like she wanted to disappear. Dan looked like he already had. I nearly lost my daughter. And you thought that was less important than a roast dinner. I stood up. So here's how this is going to go. I'm done pretending. I'm done keeping peace that costs me my dignity. I came tonight so you could all hear the truth. And then I turned to leave. No dramatic storming off. No tears. Just quiet resolve. Lorraine called after me once, something about how I was embarrassing myself. Dan didn't even get out of his chair. Which told me everything I needed to know. As I closed the front door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. Let them sit there in their polished house with their fake smiles and lukewarm casseroles. I had a daughter to raise. A home to rebuild. A life to protect. And I was finally doing it on my own terms. After the dinner debacle, I half expected Dan to come home swinging, to accuse me of humiliating him and his mother, to demand an apology, or to pull the old "you could have handled that better" card. But he didn't. He came home late. Quiet. Didn't say a word. Just walked into the house, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall like it had answers. I didn't speak either. I was done starting conversations he never finished. The silence between us wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Suffocating. Like a final breath before something ends. The next morning, I woke up early, packed Ava's school lunch, and got her ready without a word from Dan. He kissed her on the forehead before she left, then mumbled a barely audible "I'm going to work." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, just emptiness. There was nothing left to give. A few days later, he finally broke the silence. I told my mom we're taking a break from family dinners. I glanced at him. You didn't need to do that. I already took a break. You were just invited. He flinched, but said nothing. Then, after a pause, Lex, you embarrassed me. There it was. Not you were right. Not I'm sorry. Just you embarrassed me. I took a deep breath. Dan. I've been embarrassed for years. Smiling while your mother criticized me. Making excuses for you while you stayed silent. Pretending we were a team when I was playing the whole game alone. He leaned on the kitchen counter. You don't get it. My mom, no, I snapped. You don't get it. Your mom was never the issue. You were. He looked stunned. I could have handled her. What I couldn't handle was you standing next to me, saying nothing. Letting her steamroll me, disrespect our home, and invalidate Ava's illness, and acting like it was all just how she is. Dan looked away. What do you want me to say? That it's too late, I said softly. And it was. That week, I called a therapist. Not for my marriage, for myself. I started going twice a week, unpacking years of exhaustion I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I began journaling. Started sleeping better. Began breathing without holding back tears. I didn't tell Dan about the sessions. Not to hide them, just because they weren't about him anymore. I was rebuilding, not negotiating. And for the first time, the house felt like mine. Not a battlefield. Not a waiting room for his approval or his mother's. Just mine and Ava's. Then came the day Dan forgot to pick up Ava from school. He said he was caught up at work. But I saw the lie in his eyes. He was spiraling. Because I wasn't. Because the power had shifted. And he felt it. The next weekend, Lorraine showed up unannounced. I didn't let her in. She stood on the porch holding a tin of her signature lemon bars, smiling like the snake she was. I thought we could talk, she said. I opened the door just enough for my voice to carry. I have nothing to say to you. And if you want a relationship with Ava, it won't happen through guilt trips and casseroles. She blinked. No one had ever spoken to her like that, especially not someone she considered beneath her. I'm her grandmother, she huffed. And I'm her mother. And your access to her is not a given. Then I closed the door. Gently. But firmly. That night, Dan finally asked. Are we over? I looked him in the eye. I don't know yet. But I do know I'm not going back to how things were. Ever. He nodded slowly. And I saw it click. Not the fear of losing me. The fear that he already had. There was a moment, right after Dan asked are we over? Where I realized something huge. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting. I was. But I wasn't mourning him anymore. I was mourning the version of myself that waited for him to change. And I wasn't that woman anymore. 2 weeks later, I found a small but beautiful rental home on the other side of town. It had sunlight in the kitchen, a fenced backyard for Ava, and most importantly, peace. I didn't tell Dan right away. I didn't owe him that. I waited until the lease was signed and the boxes were packed. I'm moving out next week, I said flatly, while Ava was at school. Dan blinked like he didn't hear me. You're what? I'm moving out. I've already signed the lease. Ava and I will be gone by next weekend. He sank into a chair like the air had been punched out of him. You didn't even talk to me about it? No, I said simply. Because I've spent 10 years talking and not being heard. This time, I acted. The days leading up to the move were quiet, too quiet. Dan didn't argue. He just sulked, hovered, and sighed like that would somehow change my mind. But I'd made my peace. I called a lawyer, initiated the divorce, and made it clear, no drama, no blame games, just custody for Ava, and my freedom. And surprisingly, Dan didn't fight it. I think deep down, he knew he lost me a long time ago. But of course, Lorraine didn't take it well. She called me. Twice. Then showed up at the house again when she realized the moving truck was in our driveway. What are you doing to my son? She demanded, arms crossed like she had any say in it. I'm doing what you never taught him to do. I replied. Taking responsibility. For my happiness. For my child. She scoffed. So now you're punishing everyone because you're too emotional? I looked her square in the eye. My daughter was in the hospital and you wanted pot roast. You're lucky I'm not punishing you with a restraining order. She had no comeback for that. Just a red face and a bitter mutter before she stomped off, defeated. The move was smooth. Quiet. Freeing. The first night in our new place, Ava and I had pizza on the living room floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes. She laughed as we used paper plates and told me we should always eat on the floor. For the first time in a long while, I laughed too. Because it wasn't just a new house. It was our beginning. No in-laws. No silence. No emotional limbo. Just us. A few days later, I got the finalized divorce papers. Dan didn't fight the terms. Didn't ask for anything. He just signed. And I mailed them back with a calm heart. Lorraine texted me one last time. You broke this family. I stared at the message, smiled faintly, and replied, no. I just stopped pretending it was whole. Then I blocked her. It had been 3 months since the move, and my new life felt light. No more walking on eggshells. No more dreading dinner invitations. No more carrying the weight of a marriage that left me drained. Ava was happier too, like a little sunbeam soaking up every ounce of calm our home offered. She slept better. Smiled more. And for the first time in a while, I saw the sparkle in her eyes that had faded when the chaos peaked. Every morning started with music in the kitchen and pancakes that didn't have to be perfect. Every night ended with a storybook and a warm hug. We were okay. We were thriving. Then came the slow creep of desperation. Dan started texting again. You've really moved on, huh? Don't you think Ava needs both her parents full-time? I know I made mistakes. I just want my family back. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. Dan didn't want us back. He wanted the version of me that tolerated everything. And she didn't live here anymore. Then Lorraine reached out. Again. She emailed me this time, as if formality could dress up her guilt. Ava deserves to know her grandmother. I miss her dearly. We all do. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly got stuck. Ava deserved love, respect, and people who didn't treat her like a bargaining chip. She wasn't some doll Lorraine could play doting grandma with just to feel better about herself. I didn't reply. The next week, a package arrived for Ava, a frilly pink dress, a necklace, and a picture frame with a family photo from before the divorce. A message scribbled inside the box read, "Family is forever. Grandma loves you." I handed the whole thing to Ava. Do you want to keep it? I asked gently. She held the dress, thought about it, then shrugged. Maybe the necklace. Can we give the rest to charity? That was my girl. But it wasn't over. 2 weeks later, Dan showed up unannounced. I didn't answer the door. I watched him through the peephole, standing there with tired eyes and a wrinkled button-up like he wanted to sell me remorse. He knocked once. Twice. Then called. I let it ring. Then finally, he texted, "I made a mistake letting you go. Everything's falling apart without you." I sat on the couch holding my warm tea, Ava watching cartoons beside me, and for the first time since everything unraveled, I smiled at his message, not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I realized something powerful, it wasn't me who fell apart. It was the weight of everything I held up alone that finally collapsed. And once I let go, I could breathe again. A few days later, my lawyer called. Your ex wants to renegotiate visitation. Says he's not okay being shut out. I sighed. He's not being shut out. He's just not in control anymore. We agreed on what was fair. Structured. Supervised for now. Ava didn't ask for him often, and I didn't push. She would get to decide in time. Meanwhile, I started something new. A freelance gig turned into a steady contract. I began consulting remotely, building something just for me. My own money. My own rhythm. No one telling me I had to make it all work while being told I wasn't doing enough. I even joined a local community group, something just for connection, not survival. I met women with stories like mine. Strong. Kind. Done with shrinking to fit into someone else's version of wife or daughter-in-law. I wasn't just surviving. I was living. The last time I saw Lorraine, she tried one more time, a charity gala where she clearly didn't expect me to show up. When she saw me across the room, she hesitated, then approached with that same overly polite smile. I heard you've been doing well, she said, lips tight. I have. She shifted, then glanced at Ava, who was holding my hand. You could have tried harder to keep the family together. I looked her dead in the eyes and replied, I did. For 10 years. But I was the only one trying. Then I turned to Ava and whispered, let's go, my baby. And we walked away, this time, not because I was pushed out, but because I chose to leave.